welcome to Early Years TV with me, Kathy Brodie. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Lynnette.
Oh, thank you very much, Kathy. It's good to be here.
I'm really interested to find out about what you're doing at SchemaPlay, because I know it is something quite different and it's a unique take on some things. So, but before we dive straight into that, let's have a little think about what is SchemaPlay. Where's this come from? Can you tell me a bit about it, please?
Yes. Well, as mentioned just then, SchemaPlay is the name of our organisation. But the concept of SchemaPlay has been around probably now for about 30 years. It's quite widely recognised. It's been promoted by Chris Affey, Tina Bruce, Kathy Nutt-Brown, Chris Arnold, and I know, Kathy, you also see the value of SchemaPlay and also promote this. Chris Affey first identified SchemaPlay, and she defined children's behaviours, most commonly seen in those children of around 2 and 3 years of age. Some that you might be familiar with is something like transporting, where you might see a child with their arms full of objects walking from one end of the room to another, or perhaps loading up trucks with things and you suddenly realise that all the blue things from your nursery have disappeared and they're in a truck. And funny enough, just last week I was in a coffee shop and it was very amusing. I just happened to see this 2.5-year-old just sort of moving up and down, and I thought, where are her parents, just for a moment, and then I realised what she was doing. And she'd gone to one of the crisp stands and taken the packets of crisps and was removing them from one stand to another, right the other side of the cafe. And the poor lady who'd just stacked them was a bit bemused. She thought, hang on a minute, I've just done this job. So these children, they like to play these different behaviours out. They're a novelty to them. Other children might take to containing, for example, where they put lots of things in jars or pots and so forth. And you might see that being used again in water play and sand play. Yeah. And when we observe these behaviours, the good practices, of course, is to enable them to flourish. So to let children apply them to a variety of different contexts and to see how they fit and how they work in different scenarios. So John and I, who set up SchemaPlay, we're really keen to promote this. We really see the value in it as well. But we're taking it just a little bit further. And what we're looking at is something that Chris Affey usefully identified, and it's this distinction between a scheme and a schema. The scheme being operative, so like you're transporting, you're containing and so forth, and the schema being figurative, so a picture image. And it was Piaget who first identified this, and John and I really agree with both Piaget and Affey that it is very useful. It's very useful for supporting practitioners to see how learning through play works, but also how they can support progression in play.
Yeah. I do think that is so interesting. As you say, we do see transporters in more or less every setting you go into. There's going to be somebody transporting at some point, whether that's in buckets or bags, or there's going to be children carrying things about the place. And there would be practitioners and educators stood there saying, where's all the blocks gone? Where's it's something that we do see that quite a lot, don't we? And it's really interesting that you and John have picked up on that and have then taken that a step forward.
We recently, just last week, got an email from one of the practitioners, and she said, over the few weeks that we've been working on this, it's been quite tremendous how I've changed my practice. She said, I had a little girl who was really into sorting and matching. And she said, and I would have noticed that before and probably given her more opportunities. But she said, now I'm thinking of it at a much bigger level. She said, I'm thinking of it in terms of providing more resources for just her to find and explore, but also I'm thinking of how do we make these things more meaningful for children, so it's not just a repetitive activity. So she seeded the environment with lots. She first of all showed her how to match something, so she had some shapes and she just matched them to sockets. Most people have those in a nursery. Yeah. She then, after showing her, stepped back and just let her play with it. She really took to this matching, so she made sure she seeded lots of opportunities for matching. So she found matching opportunities indoors and outdoors and so forth. After a while, the matching started to ease off. And what an analogy, if you like, when children are in flow, I kind of see it. Do you remember those plate spinners? They had the rod and the plate spinning.
Yes, yeah.
how I imagine children in flow. So this little girl's matching up, taking risk in her own play and really enjoying it. And then the plate starts to wobble a little bit. And when we look at our model, it's got two small circles above the large one, which sort of tries to explain that we need a lot of time for the free flow. Yeah. And then we just need a small amount of time, either by a peer, another child, or by a practitioner, just stepping in at the right moment, and if you like, just giving a little something to get the plate spinning again. So she'd noticed the plate wasn't really spinning, was starting to wobble a little bit. So she thought, well, what's a nice progression from matching? She'd already seen differences in length and different in height and matched them. So the practitioner thought maybe grading. So she introduced her to an activity where she had lots of different size lengths of cord and showed her how she graded small to the longest. The little girl apparently took to this really well and repeated it every day. So she made sure she had more resources outside for her to grade in different ways. But she also knew this little girl really enjoyed the cafe role play. So they had different grades, different sizes of cups. So if the children were coming with 1 penny, the cup got filled to a small line. If it was 2, went a bit higher, and 3. So she was grading in different ways, but now pouring drinks as well. And that grading continued, but we also saw a connecting scheme coming in. Some of your viewers may be familiar with that, where children like connecting blocks together. Yeah. So they put some blocks out for her in a little basket with a couple of objects. They didn't do anything. I thought maybe the practitioner would show her something with it, but she didn't. She just seeded it. And then we saw this little girl connecting the cubes together and matching them against the objects and building the tower as tall as the objects. Mm. And when the practitioner saw all these objects and the cubes graded, she then introduced counting to her so that they could do a tally of how tall it was. So we went from schemes of sorting, matching, to grading, to measuring, and then tallying. Really quite phenomenal in just a stretch of a few weeks. So that was really remarkable.
And of course, the really mind-blowing thing about that is that the child has led all that. That's not a teacher or an educator sat with a worksheet saying, right, well, you've done this, now you're going to go on and do tallies. That has totally been child-led and child-initiated, hasn't it?
I think, for me, I've always tried to be a practitioner on the ground doing child-centred learning. I always hoped I celebrated that about myself, but now I think I would do it so much better, identifying the schemes and the schema progression in this way. Just to highlight that scheme and schema, I could just give another case study because I think it would bring it to life a little bit more. My mind was just going back to a little boy called Toby, who we had watched him with a supermarket trolley in the playground, and he was filling it with lots and lots of objects. This went on for about 25 minutes. And his practitioner was watching on because we'd been reading what Fisher had written about not interfering and watching. And she said out to me, I wonder what's happening. Anyway, eventually he turned all the objects out of the trolley onto the floor and said, I can't find one. So the practitioner thought, I can step in here. She said, what are you looking for, Toby? And he said, I'm recycling. And she thought, so she looked at this pile of objects on the floor and thought, does he have an idea of what recycling is or not? She wasn't sure. And he'd only transported these goods. There hadn't been any sorting. So she said, Toby, I've got something, an activity on recycling that I think you might like. Can I run in and get it? So yes. So she went in and she came back with a little truck. And on the outside of it was 3 buckets.
Oh, yes, yeah.
You might have seen them. So she explained to Toby how different materials went in, and she looked at what he had on the floor and she picked out 3 different things to say, this is metal, this is card, and this is paper. And she talked about how they would need to go in different ones. He was so focused, it was unbelievable. He then turned around and said, well, how can I do this now? So she said, well, what do we need? So they went and found some buckets. They set them out. And she just modelled the practitioner just for a very short moment, just a couple of minutes, putting them into different buckets. And then she stepped back. Toby played with this activity for 1 hour and 45 minutes. She was in search of more things to sort. So that night she said to his mum, does he know recycling? Where's it come from? Because we haven't done it in the setting yet. And she said, I don't honestly know. But she said, we are moving house. So perhaps he's heard me say something. She said, but we're going to the recycling centre at the weekend, so I'll take him with me. So she took Toby, and apparently they've got a sunroof. And because you can't get out at the recycling, he popped his head out to watch what's going on. And in the meantime, his practitioner thought, well, what will he see when he's there? So she thought maybe a high-vis vest, maybe a hat. She got a clipboard and some paper out and various other things. And Toby, and what she did was she just put them in the area where Toby had previously played, but didn't set them up, just left them there. Toby came back in on the Monday morning. It took him half an hour to build his recycling centre. And I was lucky enough just to arrive at that point to see him standing with a clipboard and paper, hat on, high-vis on, and was saying to children, can I take your name? And then he was directing them to places. So I thought, what is he doing? Anyway, I said to my colleague, John Siraj-Blatchford, what do you think he's doing? And he said, well, at my recycling centre, when we go to recycle, we have to show where we live and give our details.
Oh, right.
So this was interesting. So this, to me, helps really the schema come to light. So the schema is the figurative impression, the picture. So he obviously had a picture in his mind of what a recycling operative looked like.
Yeah.
The scheme that he'd seen being utilised there was obviously this chat recording. So what we were seeing Toby do, and this was the first time he'd mark made as well, which was very interesting, was he was recording every child coming in as what he had a figurative knowledge of, so the schema, and the operational knowledge of what this man does. So the schema and scheme were both feeding his play. So he'd gone from transporting to sorting to now mark making and recording, and was really becoming a recycling operative. He was the recycling operative. It got me thinking, Frank Smith in the 1960s wrote, in order to get children reading, they need to join the reading club. Yeah. Well, his key person had said that she tried everything mark making, trucks in paint, sand, all the things that you'd always explored to get children mark making, and he never turned to any of it. Now, I think, if you like, Toby had joined the writing club. He saw a real purpose for it. It was something he wanted to know about, and so it was meaningful to him, and so he did it. So this is also something John and I are building into our work of trying to help practitioners to see the meaning for children in doing something, to make them want to do it. So this gap in reading and writing that we hear about, and numbers and so forth, we're trying to bring that to life now by making it really meaningful for the children in their play as well.
And so what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the practitioner's role is actually a lot of observation, a lot of making understanding of that, and just stepping in just at that moment when needed, rather than leading the play. Is that right?
Oh, you're absolutely right, Kathy. And I know Julie Fisher wrote about this, and I'm totally with her on it. What we were seeing in settings in both of these projects initially was a lot of hands-on involvement with the practitioners. I think partly because it might be because they don't feel that they're seen to be doing a job if they're constantly engaging with the children. Two, I think sometimes they just not sure maybe what they're looking for, and I think that is really the value of schema, this identification that Afi made of these defined behaviours. They are crucial, they are so important, and so much so we know about this is John and I have been, if you like, working out what the prerequisites are for more complex operations, and in our work in Walsall we're helping the practitioners to understand progression, building upon these schemes that they're seeing. So we've actually identified the prerequisite schemes for reading and writing, for measuring, for adding, and they are very, very relevant. And what the child will do is they start to pull these schemes together at a time when it's right for them, when they feel they're ready. that's what the unique child is all about. We can't force it, it's only when they're ready, but they do pull them together, and then we get a schema coming through with these schemes being pulled together, and that leads to more complex operations. And I think if we can start to understand how they link to later learning, I think the value will be recognised a lot more, and realising that there is some progression here, and it's so important, and it's building upon something the children want to do, and I don't think you can beat that.
Absolutely. And